The Story Talks Back. Almost everything that we remember, think about, or imagine is a story. Stories entertain us, inform us, and even define us. They have upsides, and they have downsides. This podcast explores the power of story in every aspect of our lives. I'm Dave Stanton. Thank you for joining us. In a career spanning 4 decades, Michael Horton acted in some of TV Land's most celebrated series, including Murder, She Wrote, MASH, Taxi, Hill Street Blues, LA Law, ER, Star Trek First Contact, 21 Jump Street, and over 100 other shows. He also gave voice to characters in numerous animated series, including The Incredible Hulk, The Transformers, and G.I. Joe, and appeared in over 2,000 TV and radio commercials. On stage, Horton has appeared in several of Shakespeare's plays at the famed Old Globe Theater in San Diego, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Ashland, Oregon, the Seattle Rep, and many other theaters. Most recently, he has been co-host of the Digital Production Buzz podcast and is organizer and moderator for the Creative Pro user group, which brings together thousands of behind-the-scenes Hollywood professionals to share tips and accomplishments. Well, it's great to welcome you to The Story Talks Back.
And it's good to see you,
appreciate
David.
your time. Yeah,
Well,
thank you. You too.
It's been 40 years or something like that, right?
Right. Since we met in kind of a funny circumstance. You were acting in All the Way Home on the USC campus, and I was a journalist covering that for the USC paper.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that was back in the 80s, early 80s or something like that. And Here we are 40 years later. Holy moly. I can't really get my head around those kind of numbers. And I find myself saying them a lot.
Right.
Lately. 50 years ago, 40 years ago, things are like,
right.
Gosh, these things go so fast. And I do remember it like it was yesterday, but it was again 40 years ago. 40 years ago. Well, it's Jesus.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start by asking you about, this is all about stories and storytelling. And I wanted to ask you if you remember anyone or anything from your childhood or your formative years that might have pointed you in the direction of stories and storytelling, or might have made you more interested in stories?
Yeah, that's a good question. Off the top of my head, it probably was my dad. I'm an Army brat, so we lived all over. I was born in Japan. We lived in Germany. We lived in Georgia. We lived all over. Although my formative years were in Seattle. And but my dad was he was like the kind of an entertainment officer. He ran officers clubs and things like that. And as part of his job, he did a lot of shows and produced a lot of shows, brought in entertainers. And he was also a puppeteer. He had his own puppet show and handcrafted puppets. He had his own puppet stage. And along with my mom, they did puppet shows for children, especially in Germany while I was living there. And so that would have been about 4 years old to 9 years old or something like that. And I remember those distinctly, primarily because especially when you're a young kid watching a puppet, despite the fact that you can see the people who are actually moving the puppets, you're not focused on them at all. You're focused on that puppet, and you're focused on that drama that's happening in front of you. And each show even though I've saw it probably 10 times, they're always different depending on the reactions of the audience. And but those were great stories because they were fairy tales. They were the stories, especially they were German stories of the German lore. And and a lot of violence. And it wasn't so much Punch and Judy, but there was a lot of hitting. And I don't think you can probably get away with some of the stuff that they were doing, but women did get beaten up in most of those kind of puppet shows, or the female characters anyway. But yeah, my dad was a really good puppeteer, also could do a lot of voices. And as I gravitated older and older and older, I got into acting, but I don't know if I got into acting primarily because of him, or it was just something that I could do and that I liked, and that I thought I could make a living at or something. But as far as my love of stories, yeah, they probably started with puppets, and my dad.
Do you remember some other books or authors that you liked as you were
No,
growing up?
I wasn't a reader at all when I was a kid.
Mm,
I became
okay.
a voracious reader when probably in my late teens, and then on.
Okay.
But and no, I was I didn't like school. I didn't have the ability to concentrate very much. If they didn't have a name for it, but I would have had ADD back then. There was no way in the world I could sit still. I was always doing something. I was always out doing something. I was always, when we would play, and I mean play, we would get so into character. I mean, so into character when we play war or cowboys and Indians and that sort of thing. Whatever character we would choose to play, we would all get so into it, and me especially. You couldn't break character. You were committed to that person until you finally had to go to lunch or something like that. But that was my childhood, and much different than the modern childhood today, where it's all your parents telling you where to go, what to do, and all this other stuff. Then it was go out, be home before dark, and do whatever the heck you want to do. And when we played, it was really intense, and it was the characters that you developed would go from evolve from day to day to day, depending on what was in vogue in a movie that you saw. My dad would always say, I could tell what movie you guys saw from what you were playing after you got out of the theater, whether it be whether it be Cowboys and Indians, or whether it be war movies, or whether it be Ivanhoe or something like that. And to this day, I regret that my children weren't able to have that kind of experiences like I did. And especially growing up in the Army, you grew up in all these forts. Of course, there's a wall around the fort, and there's no way you're going to get lost or anything. It's just, so you just go off and you can go anywhere and do anything. I don't remember there being a secure zone that you couldn't possibly, and if there was a fence there, so you just didn't, go over it. But that was my childhood: intense play, intense character acting, and but not a lot of books.
Did you, did you sort of make up your own stories for the movie characters?
Sure.
Or did you...
No, yeah. You first of all, you become the character from a movie, and that's an argument in itself. You want to be the let's take an example. My favorite movie at that time in the '60s was The Great Escape with Steve McQueen. And everybody would want to be the cooler king. He wanted to be Steve McQueen because he was the coolest guy. And so you'd have to make, everybody would be wanting to be him. And then finally we decide, okay, you can be him. And then you have to decide on the other characters. And so you're playing those characters, and somebody's got to be the German, and somebody's got to be this kind of thing. And by the time you vote on that, then the story happens. And it's partly the movie, and it's partly what you improvise, and these things can go on for like 2 to 3 hours. And we would have guns and sticks and things like that, and when you would die, they'd be the greatest death scenes ever. It was just amazing stuff. And but each thing would be probably based on a movie. And most of the movies were war movies or Cowboys and Indians, and just based on what you saw on that matinee. And then it would be 45 minutes of arguing who got to play who. So, but those were our stories. And sometimes our stories were really amazing. I mean, because we just evolved from that little premise and that movie, maybe that one line, and then it'll go on for 2-3 hours, and we had this brilliant. And I remember just some of the stuff that was just absolutely extraordinary. It's too bad there wasn't a camera on this. You know, these little kids playing intensely, committedly these characters that they developed.
Someone else I interviewed actually made movies as a child. He was the director,
Yeah,
and he got all his friends to be in his movies. And he actually got some little recognition, a little bit of a fame from doing that, because Kodak did something on him.
My dad had an 8mm movie camera, but I never did anything with it. And I really wish I could have, because I ended up kind of being the director of what we would do. But I never was interested in making movies with this camera. I was never interested in photography or any of that stuff. But lately, I've been digitizing some of those 8mm movies that he made, those home movies, and which are interesting. He didn't take a lot of photographs, but he took a lot of 8mm movies. But my whole remembrance of the 8mm was, especially at Christmas morning, he would have these gigantic floodlights. You just flood the room with lights and then take and so when you're coming in, it's like this. Every Christmas, it's like this.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so I mean, maybe that turned me off or something, but anyway, I didn't have any desire to do anything with that 8mm camera. Other friends did, some of the other guys did. And I wonder whatever happened to some of those movies, but he had an editing machine and everything. It never went far.
So how did you think that sort of evolved into a career for you? I mean, how did you ultimately become an actor, acting out stories?
I think I always been somewhat competitive, although I was never an athlete, and that was one of the reasons I was probably competitive. I wanted to be one of the cool kids, and the cool kids in high school and junior high school were athletic, but I was somewhat good, but I was not anywhere near as good as those guys were. And I knew I was never going to be in that league. They're the ones who are always going to be the popular ones, because for whatever reason, athletes are popular. And but so I had to do something else in order to possibly get into that whole realm. Now, acting came about with this class in junior high, which was like a debate class or something like that, where they made you get up in front of the class and do something. And I think it was an improv that was given to all of us, and they're giving us a particular subject, and then you have to get up there and improvise on it as a character that you chose. You got about 15 minutes to come up with it. And so anyway, I came up with something, and I came up with this English guy who had an accent. And at the time I could do, voices pretty well. At least I thought I could do voices pretty well. I went up and I did something, and it went really well. It only lasted about a minute and a half. It went really well, and I got laughs. And then not only did I get laughs, after the end of the class, that was really good. That was really good. That was really good. That was really good. That was the first validation of anything I'd gotten especially in school situation. I was not real popular. I was more bullied than I was anything, but I got a little validation out of that. And then after that, I did a little bit more of those kinds of things. But as I got into high school, then I got into drama, and I was good at it. And even though it's, being in drama is not the coolest thing, it's not like being a football player. if you're good at it, you know, you have a little more respect than if you were to not even try, or not even be anybody, just be there. And so I was able to be part of that group. And wasn't that I loved acting or anything like that. It I just got a lot of respect for it. And you know, nobody put me down for it. They teased me a little bit, but not big time, you know, because I was fairly good at what I did. So so that got me going. But even at the end of high school, it wasn't what I wanted to do with my career. I didn't really have an idea what I wanted to do, except I had a love of the outdoors, and I did a lot of hiking in high school. And I did a lot of hiking alone because nobody ever wanted to go with me, because they just wanted to go hiking. They didn't want to go hiking. So I had this idea that I wanted to be a forest ranger. And I was going to go to the University of Washington to become a forest ranger. And until I found out it just needs all these science requirements, and there was just no way in the world. So a couple of my friends went to theater school in San Diego, and they said, hey, you know, why don't you come on down? And it's a good school. And I auditioned for it. I got in, and then it went from there. Then I really got serious about it, and that became my career, because I just found that I was just something really good at, and I found it to be fun. And I got real serious about it, and I worked my ass off. So it's like because I had to be good, the better, the best. You know, I had to beat out everybody, and I had to, you know, it's just because it's so competitive. And I took it very seriously, which is something you have to do. And it became this thing that it's not just what you want, it's something you need. And that's when that passion takes over, and that's what keeps you going through all the bad times. You know, those parts where you want to get so badly and you don't, for whatever reason, but you keep going just because you have to. You have no other choice. And that's what keeps you going. And you know, do something that you're passionate about. That you hear that cliche all the time, but it's that passion that keeps you going through all the crap. And it did me, and I made a good living for it, 25 years.
So what was the need? Was it the need to express yourself somehow, or?
That's a really good question. I don't know what that need. I don't know how to tell you what that need was, but that there was certainly that need. There was that need to yeah, I guess if you're going to say express myself, that's probably it. I mean, now that you put those words into my mouth, I guess that's it.
Well, you can have another answer.
Well, no, I don't think there's a better answer. I wish there was, but yeah, I mean, I had to express myself in that through those characters. I was always an actor. I was never a performer. There's a whole big different thing. You know, it's you know, performer is that somebody who is you know, an MC at a show, and he's just got that performing ability. And I was never that. I'm much better and much more at ease when it's somebody else's words that I can memorize and get up there and interpret. Although I've had to perform in many things, I'm much better as an actor, and I'm much more relaxed as an actor. And I think most actors are. I mean, most actors are fairly shy anyway. It's the way to express themselves is through the stage and through a character and through their words, and by becoming them. You don't want to be you. You know, performers are yourself, and there's not a lot I think I can share with people out there as a performer, because I'm just like you. I'm not, performers seem to be a little bit heightened, and they seem to be somebody I can just, I admire and I can watch and love. That I'm just not that person. I'm that person who can interpret a character, become that character, and hopefully do it better than you can. And
but I mean, you must have met a lot of performers. You must have had a sense
yeah,
of what they're like. And
yeah, I could I could probably do what they can do if I really, really worked at it. I was just never that comfortable doing that kind of stuff. And again, like I said, I would rather take a script and interpret that script and work off of the actor that I'm working with, rather than be out there and that one man show and then speak to you. It's not that, I admire these people enormously, but I can't do it as well as they can. I think they're just born to do that. And although for the last 20 years, running this, which I think we'll get into for a little bit, running this group that I run, it requires me to be a performer. And so I've learned how to do it just by becoming a character. And I'm the person who is up there running this group isn't really me. It's this character I developed over the years. It sounds
Really?
like me. It looks like me. I've created shtick that works, and but it's not Michael Horton at all. It's a kind of a heightened version of Michael Horton, and I'm pretty good at it, but it's taken me a while to develop that character. Again,
so you're talking about a group of
yeah, I run this
production
organization.
People. Yeah,
Right.
Tell me about it.
I run this organization for people in the post-production business, film editors, and and it's all about showing them the latest software. It's all about showing the latest techniques of film editing, storytelling, a lot of storytelling. That's what this whole thing is about. And I introduce the people who come up stage, all these extraordinary people and very creative people. And I run the meeting, I run the show, I keep it moving. And that's my job as the MC. Also keep everybody entertained, keep them in their seats, that sort of thing. And so it requires me to be this person who is good at it. And over the years, I've developed a character that is a good MC of these shows. And but once that show was over, it's back to being Michael Horton. And we go out to pizza, I'm a completely different person. So
that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, it is. But that's because I'm not a natural performer. I have to work at it.
And maybe that's how performers feel about what they do. They
probably
inhabit a character.
Yeah, it's. I'd like to sit down with them, and again, they hone their craft for a number of years in order to get to that point, and I had to do the same thing. And but you would think it's just some people, it just comes natural to them. They're the life of the party. The people who walk in, and the party's sort of like this, but as soon as they walk in, everything changes. It's just you gravitate to these people, and they just have this natural ability to suck you in. And I just think it's God-given rather than at least. But again, they have to work at it. Everybody has to work at it. You can't just.
Well, that's a really good insight.
Yeah, but it'd be a good thing. You talk to a performer and see what it is that makes them tick.
But I mean, even I, in my day-to-day job, I'm putting on a show in some respects.
Well, I think yeah. If you want to really get down to it, we're putting on a show anytime I'm putting on a show talking to you, you're putting on a show
Right,
talking to me. This
right.
isn't the real you. This isn't the real me. Is anybody finding this interesting? It's
Yes,
that's the next
I
thing.
am.
That's what I'm thinking. Like every time I open my mouth, what's the next word to come out that keep people from like
Oh,
so, yeah,
you mean here or
yeah,
everywhere?
yeah, here. It's here. Yeah. What am I going to say in order to keep people from, hitting the thing and going to another show? But any interaction we have with another human being is really not who we are. It is we are behaving a little bit differently. You're asking me questions, I'm answering. I'm asking you questions, or answering. It's not. It's weird, so we have to work at it. We also have to make each other feel comfortable. That's another thing. You have to make yourself feel you have to make me feel comfortable. I have to make you feel comfortable, and that requires us to put in more effort than we really want to. And but the more you do this, the better you'll get. Even the more I do these kind of things where people are asking me questions, the better I will get. But I don't do very many of them. So it's weird.
But do you feel like when you're acting as a character somebody else created and wrote, does that feel more relaxing, more natural somehow? Or is that requiring another type of focus?
Yeah, I mean, it does. Well, obviously, it requires a little bit of focus, but everything requires that focus. But as an actor, where you have somebody else's lines to say and your interpretation of who that particular person is, once you find who he is, and sometimes that takes a long, long time. In case of if you're given that long, long time, like you are in the theater. But if you're not given a long, long time for like a television show, for instance, where you're handed pages just before you go on sometimes because they've changed everything.
Right.
You just got to make it work. And so you're trying to make it work based on what you know about this guy that you're playing. And that's it. You have no other technique than to you've already, you know who this guy is, you know his backstory, you've given him a backstory. Now somebody gives you the lines, and it doesn't matter what the lines are anymore. You have a pretty good idea how to say them. And then, of course, how that person that you're performing with, how he says something is how you're going to say it back. So you got a good actor you're playing with, he's going to make you even better. And I mean, acting's listening. And so you listen to the person that you're talking to, and that'll give you an enormous amount of insight to who that person is. But with television, it's so fast, you can't really overthink it. You just got to know who this person is based on the script that you were given. And even if they do change some of the lines, you still know how to play this guy. And that's what they hired you for. They don't want you to overthink it. You don't have time to overthink it. You'll see a lot of people who get hired over and over and over. It's because they can bring it. They can do the job, and they're not going to. In television, it's all about getting the day done. Everybody's working their asses off trying to do the best they possibly can, but in the end, it's you got to get the day done so you can go on to the next day. You only got a certain amount of days to do this whole thing. You only got a certain amount of budget to do this, and you better all be on the top of your game. If somebody isn't, it brings the whole thing down. So the people who work a lot are a lot of they're people who are good at what they do, but they can bring it, and they can bring it without problems or issues or drama, and they'll get hired a lot. And the ones who can't bring it, then they don't get hired a lot, despite the fact that they might be the most brilliant actors in the world. And it just can't happen for them in this speedy television thing. They can be brilliant in the theater because they have this thing called rehearsal, which is awesome. It's just, tell you, it's great. This thing called rehearsal. Television actors or film actors don't like to rehearse a lot because it's very spontaneous and the camera really likes that. But in the theater, if you for that, when you're looking for that character and you're looking for that arc, oh man, rehearsals are just. Ask any actor who does a lot of theater. He said, "To hell with the performance. It's the rehearsals are their most fun. It's just finding the character, finding the arc, finding the story, and even though it's all there, each day is different, and each day is a little bit of growth or complete collapse. But it's just so much fun, and that's what I loved, especially about acting, was the rehearsal. But you don't get that in film and television.
Can you think of any characters that you felt like were more you or more your own story, where there was more of a symbiosis between you and the character?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few plays I've done. I mean, every character that you play is a lot of you. You bring to that person, and I mean, you can't lose yourself entirely in a character that there's none of you in. I mean, that's kind of like schizophrenia, not rather than acting. And but yeah, there's been a few times where I've lost myself in the person, but not lost yourself to the point that you're not aware of your surroundings, you're not aware of the person that you're talking to. But yeah, there's times where there's like 80% me in that character. I can just see me in that character. And there was a show I did years ago, back in the 80s, and it was based on D.H. Lawrence's The Fox. And it was a big hit here in Los Angeles. And the role I did was this soldier. And he was a young soldier and somewhat arrogant, but I saw a lot of myself in this guy. He was me. And he was also, there was nobody in the planet that could play this guy better than I, because I understood who he was. I don't know why I understood who he was, but immediately as I read the script, I saw how to play it. So what does that mean? I don't know. I mean, there's a few times that happens when you read something. I go, you just know who this guy is. You know how to play it, and there's something inside of you that you saw on that printed page. And in the end, nobody could have played that better than you, because they couldn't have possibly seen what you've seen. And no director could bring that out. You know, it's the actor is just right for that part. And that's happened a few times. And in that particular case, it really happened. First time I read the script, I knew exactly who this guy was. I knew exactly how to play it. And even though the director will give you little nuances here and there, which is always helpful, it's just, you know, he didn't give me anything more than I already knew what I was going to do with it. And then plus each time on stage, each performance got a little bit different. I found a little bit better. I found a little bit more. I found a little bit, who he was. And by the end of the run, oh my God, I really missed him when it was all done. And but I still had, nobody could play this thing. It's better than me. Every actor's got that story. Nobody could play that. And it's just, and there's no reason why. It's just you just know who he was based on maybe that your past events or your past stories. Who knows? But there are just certain characters that you just know who they are. And
I mean, yeah, go ahead. You know, you're talking about television and how expedient it is, how quick it is. And it tends to produce that kind of rush. It seems like it tends to produce a certain kind of story, right?
Yeah,
Or it
well,
tends to invite a certain type of storytelling.
well, maybe way back in the day, but today, some of the best storytelling is in television. And there's just so much good out there. I mean, it's just so much good. And I could honestly sit in front of all these streaming channels and sit for 24 hours a day and do it for a year. And I would find some of the most brilliant writing ever. I mean, you have playwrights writing for sitcoms and doing extraordinary things. And you didn't have that back in like the 80s and 90s when I was doing it. I mean, I did some really good shows, but it's nothing like it was today. Streaming services have brought storytelling to a whole different level.
But do you think that, that sort of past style of television, that sort of classic style of television, was creating or encouraging a certain type of story in the culture or in, the public at large, that it was sort of in some ways shaping the culture in the way that they see these stories being told?
Yeah, you mean like cop shows?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, well, back in the 60s, it was all Westerns, and then it became all cop shows. And but there's still cop shows today. There's just better cop shows, better written cop shows. And but yeah, I mean, it's television and film have always shaped the culture, from the clothes that we wear to how we talk, to what we say, how we look. It's always shaped the culture, and it always will. And we don't want to necessarily be who we are. We want to be who we admire and like, and we'd rather be them. We don't want to live our humdrum, boring lives. We would rather live their lives. And so, yeah, anything that's happening on television is always shaping the culture. And we just don't know it, especially as an actor. You don't know it until after it's over, that you might have had something to do with it. And you're going, what did I do? I mean, one of the things I did, back when I was an actor, I did a lot of commercials, a lot of these national commercials, and I did, I did them for. Talk about pop culture. I did, Mrs. Olsen, coffee, the Ever Ready Bunny, and these Coca-Cola commercials. I did all these pop culture commercials that sort of shaped the culture. And I wish I would have been able to have a copy of it. But you talk about shaping the culture. Those things did. Commercials.
Uh-huh.
That's a whole different kind of acting, but it was a great way to make a living. It was a good way to make a lot of money when you were in between jobs. It also afforded you the opportunity to do a lot of theater, because theater didn't pay hardly anything. So you can go out and do a couple of commercials, get paid residuals for 6 months, and pay the rent and do it that way. And again, you're forcing people to buy this crap that you wouldn't have bought yourself, but you brought it up, shaping the culture.
Right. What do you think? I mean, do you have a sense of how the view of storytelling in the mainstream culture has changed? Do you see any evolution in one direction or another in terms of appreciation of stories or recognition of stories?
Yeah. I mean, what you're seeing right now and on television and film are some of the best writing that has ever been. I mean, there's nothing like it. I mean, we talk about the golden age of television back in the 50s and 60s, when there was some really, the Playhouse 90s, some of the great playwrights and stuff like that. That was some good stuff out there. But today, we have so much good stuff, you can't find it all. And it's you know, again, this is art, and there's somebody out there say, "Oh, bullshit, Horton. There's a lot of crap out there." Yeah, there's a lot of crap out there, but a lot of it is so good, and it's such good writing. And I wish I would have stayed in acting just to be a part of this golden age of storytelling, because they're amazing people, and these amazingly talented people who are keeping it going and keeping, finding different ways to tell a story. I mean, you still have a beginning and a middle and an end. It's still the same structure out there, but it's the stories that they're telling that don't necessarily seem to be repeats of what was told before. It's incredible, even though they tend to do the same with the big blockbusters of the Marvel movies, and the special effects movies tend to tell the same story. It is the same story, but they do it in such a way that you just don't care, and you're entertained, you're taken away for a few minutes. But all these other non-blockbuster TV shows that are out there, they're certainly worth finding and watching. And yeah, I think it's a whole different thing today than it was 40 years ago, and I think it's better. And they say it's not brain surgery, but it is brain surgery. It's what these people do, what these writers do, is they take your brain away for about an hour and turn it into something else, and that's an okay thing. That's why we like entertainment. We want to go someplace else, and we want to learn something, and we want to see something that we've never seen, and show me that, and teach me something.
Sure.
Without teaching me something. So,
I mean, you just thinking about your group, your post-production group. I mean, you talk about ownership of a story. I mean, a story in a big budget film, you've got so many people involved who play crucial roles, and they all kind of own a piece of the story, even though they're not necessarily seen as storytellers, but all those people that you work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're storytellers, right?
Yeah, I mean, where the film is actually made is not necessarily out there in the field. It's made in post-production. It's made by the film editors, the colorists, and you ask any director that his favorite part of movie making would be in the edit bay. That's where you make your movie. And because out there it's really, really hard. You're a general of all these people, and all these people are asking you questions, and you're trying to get your day done, and you've got this wonderful script, but you're shooting these scenes that may not even be in the movie, but you're during that moment, yeah, this is the best damn scene, the best performances, the best everything, and then you get back in the edit bay and you go, oh crap, this isn't going to work, and you got to take it out. And it's why does that happen? And it just does happen, but it's also the most, that's where you, like, they say editing's cutting out the bad bits. That's but when you were doing it, when you're out there as that general moving these people around and doing the script, these are all the good bits. So you bring all those good bits back, and then you start going, this works, this doesn't work. Oh, maybe you can take this scene, put it in this position, or cut this scene out and move this around, and for some reason that becomes movie making. And that's when the directors and the people around are at their most creative. And that's I think they love it the most, because that's when you really can make the movie. And that's why they're always like these 3-4 hour first cuts. and then the studio comes in and says, you got to cut 2.5 hours out of this. And you shot 120 pages. It was 120 pages. Should have been, that's like a, 2-hour movie. But no, for some reason, it's going to be a 4-hour cut, and you got to cut all that crap out. And but that's when you make your movie. It's all in there. But making a movie isn't just the actors and the director. It's that director photography can bring so much to it. It's the costumers, it's the production designer, the everybody, all these people. Yes, just they're all storytellers in their own right. It's like you said, and they're bringing their craft to this big craft. And then you bring all that into that edit bay and hone it. And then you come up with your great movie. And hopefully you come up with your great movie. But that's where the movie is made. It's made by those people in the edit bay. So,
and what have you learned about, the craft or about people in bringing all these people together to, talk about their profession, to learn about their profession?
Yeah, everybody. When you deal with post-production, you're dealing with a lot of technical things, although even an editor, even though he's dealing with a computer and he's moving things around with a computer, he's still telling that story. He still needs to pick the best performances, even though he's talked it over with his director. Sometimes the director's not there. He's out there filming. So he's got to pick the best performances and put those performances together. And so that's where he's getting really creative. And then hopefully the director comes back and says, yeah, I like that, but I don't like that particular cut. I want you to stay on this person a little bit longer and then cut to this person, or maybe do this shot here and all this other stuff. But the editor is often in that room by himself until the actual movie is done. And then when the movie is done, then you have that first assembly or that first cut. And that's when you have it's really, really long. But the editor is bringing his craft, his storytelling ability, how he thinks the director wants it, and how he thinks it's probably best. And so he does the way he feels it should be done, and hopefully the director will like it, and or at least like part of it. And then that's when they get their heads together and they become partners. And they come up with this, let's take out this, let's move out this. Maybe we need to go out and get an extra shot because we're missing this particular beat. And so it's a wonderful craft, but they all have that same kind of ability to solve these problems. The best editors will solve the problems. And they'll solve it a lot of times before the director will come in. And then when the director comes in, they just get an extra set of eyes to add to the creation of this masterpiece that you're making.
But I mean, you're taking people who are used to working in isolation, really.
Yeah.
Almost like writers,
Yeah.
Well, they're all used to working isolation, and they're coming together to share something.
Yeah, I mean, a writer, as you heard over and over again, a writer doesn't write, he rewrites. And that's when your movie is done and it's brought into the edit bay, it's being rewritten. It is the final edit of your movie. It's the final rewrite. And unfortunately, a lot of movies, especially the big ones, are it's not only the director and the editor, it's the director, the editor, the producers, the movie studios, and lots of people, and everybody's got their own ideas, and so every day you're getting notes from them, and so you just have to make all that stuff work. And then you got to, after it's somewhat done, you got to go preview it in front of audiences, and then they'll have their notes. And but independent movies, the smaller movies, smaller budgeted movies, and a lot of these streaming shows, these television shows, don't have that luxury to preview in front of people. So, and they also don't have as many people getting you a lot of crap. You'll still have the studios, you'll still have producers and things like that, but you won't have as many people that you do as you do in the big budget movies. So I admire the hell out of these extraordinary directors who can do these big budget movies and actually accomplish something good with all the people's inputs. It's like everybody's got it in notes. How do you do that? I mean, it's just like, and you got 5-10 writers, and you got 5-10 producers, and you got studio people, and you got to listen to every one of them. And we all got egos, so it's just, I don't know how they do it, but somehow they do it. I mean, that's also sometimes the reason you have bad movies is because of all that input. Right. That's why, somebody, a director who can get final cut, final say is, at least it's on him. If it's a bad movie, it's on him. And that's okay. But it rarely is a bad movie if it's all on him. I mean, look at the movies in the 70s when it was all the directors. They had final cut and everything. That's some of the best movies ever made.
I mean, ultimately, what made you either sort of transition or just quit acting? What made you leave?
Well, I wasn't, I was always a working actor. I was making, good money, but, I was like guesting on TV shows and things like that. And I was never going to be a star, or at least I didn't think I was going to be a star. And I just saw myself auditioning in my 60s in front of, some 20-year-old. And I couldn't do that. And also as an actor, you don't have any power at all unless you're a movie star. Director tells you to go here and go there, and you'll go there unless you have a really good reason not to go there. And you can ask, well, how about if I do this and do that? And they don't even want to hear it because you just got to move on. And usually don't say it because it's just not worth it. And also, I can't tell you how many times where I did a particular take. And if people are not familiar with cinema and how it works, there'd be usually a camera on you over the shoulder of the person that you're talking to, right? And so you give this absolutely brilliant performance, and you may do it 2 or 3 times. Well, take 2 would have been the best performance. But what do they use? They'll use take 3 for some reason. It's like, how many times my best takes were on the cutting room floor and they use something else. That's where film editors come in. So I hated film editors. But you had no power. You had to, you could do all this brilliant work and they wouldn't show it sometimes. Sometimes they did. Sometimes they could, because as a film editor, you have to pick the best performances. And for some reason, I was getting on these shows where those film editors weren't picking the best performances. And it happened too many times. And I got so frustrated later on. I just said, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to direct. And so I made a conscious effort. I quit. I'm not doing this anymore. And so I completely focused on directing. And at that time that I did, this editing software came out called Final Cut Pro. And allowed you to take your DV camera, mini DV camera, plug it into your computer and edit your movies. So that democratized the whole thing, because prior to that, you had to use a $100,000 Avid system, and you would have to rent it, and it was extremely expensive. So if you want to make your movies, you'd have to go out and buy film, which is really expensive, and you'd have to process the film, and you have to use an Avid system. Forget it. There's no chance in hell that you could make a movie unless you had a very rich parents or something like that. But this changed everything. All of a sudden, all these people who just had these wonderful scripts and had all these great ideas were able to do it. They weren't able to do it like the big boys. It didn't look like the big boys, but they still, if you got a good story, people will forgive you that it doesn't look so great. They won't forgive you if it sounds crappy, but they'll forgive you if it doesn't look so great. And some people actually did make a few bucks, with these mini DV movies. And then things got better and better and better when digital cameras came out, and still it was fairly cheap, and editing software was really cheap, and it brought so many people into the storytelling realm. And a lot of those people are doing television today, and they started out 20 years ago, and they honed their skills on these little mini DV cameras, just like some people did on the 8mm cameras. But not as many people picked up an 8mm camera as they did a mini DV camera. And so all these storytellers who are just dying to do something like this, as soon as Final Cut Pro came out, as soon as the laptop computers came out, and they took that script that was sitting in that drawer for a while and made their little movies, and then kept doing it until now they're making a living doing it. And everything changed. So I did it for a while, and wasn't really getting anywhere. And I was taking a big financial hit at home, but I wanted to surround myself with all these editors and these people in post-production that knew more than I did. So I started this group called the Los Angeles Final Cut Pro User Group. And I had all these amazing people, one-man band filmmakers, and also great film editors like Walter Murch and people like him. I surrounded myself with people like that, and they would come in and talk about their craft, and people would come in and talk about their day that they did, trying to make their movies. Everybody helped each other, and since it was live and in person, and all these people, everybody met each other, and everybody sort of corroborated and helped each other, and made movies together that they probably never would have, because they didn't know these people. And the internet certainly helped, but face-to-face helps much, much more. And that's what my thing became about. And then it just blew up and became thousands of people, members, and we would do shows all over the world, and monthly in Los Angeles. And my wife says, you need to make money off of this thing, because we're gonna lose our house. So I figured out a way to make money off of it, and I've been doing it for the last 20 years, although now COVID's kind of put it in the back burner. And I've actually enjoyed this year and a half off so far, but I have every intention of going back once we can go back, because I just love hanging out with creative people. But I really do miss that I didn't get to direct. But I have all these excuses, I had a mortgage, I had 2 kids, all that kind of stuff. So the usual golden handcuff kind of things. I needed to pay my rent and all that.
But think how many, you're influencing so many other people and what they're doing.
I think so. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have found work just by coming to these kinds of things, and that feels really good. And so even though I can't call myself a film editor, I bring the people, I facilitate the education of all this. And
I was just thinking of that word.
Yeah. And somebody had to give me that word. I said, when somebody asked me what I did for a living, I said, I don't know. I do these shows for film editors. And then somebody said, well, you facilitate the education for these post-production people. That's what I do. Yeah, that's it. So, and it's very gratifying. It's been, so I'm more of an educator than I am, or facilitator than educator. I bring all these incredible people to show their stuff. And that also gives everybody the opportunity who's, sitting next to somebody that they don't know, to turn to them and say, hi, my name is, and that person might change their life. And that requires, especially with creative people, that requires a lot of courage, because most creative people are, most creative people are, socially awkward. And that's, something you would have to practice a lot, is to have that courage to go up to somebody and say, hi, my name is. Don't be pushy about it or anything like that. But these people that you meet, those are the people that are going to change your life. Because the entertainment industry, just like any industry, it doesn't matter what it is all about who you know. but you got to get out there and get to know them. You can't just sit behind your computer and expect it to happen. Even though you can meet on the computer, it's best to meet face to face. So you got to get out of the house. But this COVID thing is really kind of, putting a damper on everything. That's really too bad, because there's more work out there right now than there's ever been. It's there's so many projects going on. There's so many TV and film going on, and they're all looking for editors, good ones, or at least assistant editors. That I would say, if you're at all interested in doing something like that, now's the time. And there's a lot of free educational resources online, and it's a great time to learn. But then once this whole thing ends, get out of the house and start getting out there and meeting people. And you got a leg up right now, but don't, if you're not doing anything right now, then get online and start learning.
Well, I hope you're able to get back to that soon, because it's such a great service.
Yeah, well, it will. I mean, one of these days. I was hoping it would be this month, and this Delta thing happened. I don't know. It's
right.
So, but we'll beat it sooner or later. I feel optimistic.
Thank you so much for your time, Michael. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I hope I can give some sage advice there somewhere, but this has been fun, because you gave me a few memories to think about, and so I enjoy that.
The Story Talks Back is produced and hosted by Dave Stanton. The music you're hearing now was written and performed by Christopher Daydream. The theme music at the beginning of our show is an excerpt from Play by Merlin Twelfhoven, performed by Kronos Quartet as part of their 50 for the Future series. Please subscribe to The Story Talks Back on Podbean, and check us out on Instagram. See you next time.